Hello, colleagues, and welcome to a special episode of Dincast, where we're going to be looking at some explainers for you around the world of artificial intelligence and intelligent automation. So for the session on artificial intelligence, I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Burgess to join us today. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Ian. How you doing?
Very well, thank you, sir. So Andrew is the founder and CEO of Greenhouse Intelligence and author also of the Executive Guide to Artificial Intelligence. So who better to have us to take us through this explainer video so we can really understand what artificial intelligence is and probably what it isn't as well. So Andrew, a first question, I'm not an expert in this particular space. So what is artificial intelligence?
So start with a really big question. It's AI is a group of technologies. It's a range of different technologies that do various different things, and it's been around in various different forms since the 1950s, before even you and I were born. And the prevalent form of AI at the moment is what's called machine learning. So people have probably heard this expression of machine learning, and it's called machine learning because it's the machines that do the learning for you, as opposed to traditional IT application software where you've got an answer and somebody writes the code that does something and you know exactly what it's going to do. With AI, it's a very different approach, and people have to have a different mindset about this. So essentially what you're doing is giving the algorithm lots of data, and it finds the patterns and the correlations within that data and then builds what's called a model out of it. And that model is kind of synonymous with, a computer program, for example, but the machine has built this model. You can then use that for various things like prediction. So you can give it a new piece of information. It will then match that against the model and say, well, with a certain level of confidence, I think what you're showing me is this. And that confidence is really important as well, because AI works on probabilities. So it's not, and to use a couple of big words for a second, normal IT is deterministic, so you know exactly what's going to happen. AI is probabilistic, so it works on confidence levels and probabilities as well. So that's a key difference. I've got a slide I can show you that actually takes you through the different flavors of AI, if that's going to be helpful. Okay, so hopefully you can see that coming up. I think the best way to think about AI is in terms of the capabilities. So we're not going to talk about the technology because that's going to confuse people. Think about what AI can do. So think about it, first of all, in these three big buckets of capabilities. So AI is very good at capturing information. Once it's captured that information, it wants to understand what is happening. And then once we've understood what is happening, we'd like to then understand why it's happening. And it works on both unstructured data and structured data. So unstructured data are things like images, sounds, text, etc. And then structured data is what people typically know as big data. So spreadsheets, databases, etc. So within each of these boxes, we've got these different capabilities. So I'll just take you through these very, very quickly. So the first one is image recognition, and a lot of people will have heard about this. So you get things like facial recognition within this as well. But in this example, the AI is detecting a picture of a dog or recognizing a picture of a dog. So what we've done, as I described earlier, we've fed it lots of images, some of which of dogs, of which have been labeled dogs, and ideally some other images that aren't dogs that have been labeled as whatever they are. And the AI learns the patterns of pixels within that characterize a dog. And so when you show it another picture, it can then match that and work out with a level of confidence whether that's a picture of a dog or not. We can also do that with sound as well. So we get speech recognition. So you can understand the words that somebody's saying. And what I'm not talking about here is understanding the intent of those words, because that comes into the what is happening piece. This is just us actually understanding the words that are being said. So if it's a voice recording or a telephone conversation, whatever, then the AI can recognize those particular words that you're talking about. Again, it does it through this pattern recognition idea. And as well, you can do the same thing on text. This is really a search capability. So what the AI is able to do is extract metadata from documents. So, for example, if you've got a contract, it can extract the name of the parties, the limits of liability, the value of the contract, etc. And also as well classify different types of documents. So to use that contract example a bit further, it could be identifying a lease contract or a commercial contract or an employment contract. And it does this by being trained on the different types of contracts. So it's very useful that you can feed it like new contracts in and it'll tell you exactly what it is. And that works on things like emails as well. So you can extract specific words out of emails. So that's sort of unstructured data. When you move to structured data, then this is where we think about this idea of clustering, using AI for data analysis. So it'll look for different patterns within that. And, retailers will use this, for example, to look at trends of or identify particular clusters of people doing certain things. Or Amazon will use it to say, you've bought this book, therefore you should buy this book. So once we've captured all that information, then we want to understand what is happening. So one of the areas, and this is where that intent comes in, and what people are saying is, so this idea of natural language understanding. So where you've got free form text, either sounds coming in or written word, and you want to understand the intent of what somebody's saying, then you use natural language understanding. So if you were talking to or typing into a chat bot, for example, I'd like to order some flowers, then the AI would understand that you want to order something and what you want to order is flowers, and then it would go away and either a person would order the flowers for you, or maybe it's the system does that automatically as well. Another idea in terms of what is happening is this idea of problem solving and reasoning. So this is typically used when you've got a particular problem to solve, and AI will find the most optimal way to solve that problem for you. So classically, you can think about this like sat nav. So it's when you program in your sat nav, it's not kind of looking brute force at every different route. It does this very optimally. Or to use another example, if you're looking for a new type of drug, then it'll find the right molecule that fits the disease that you're trying to cure, for example. And again, it'll do this in the most optimal way. And then finally, on this section, what is happening, we've got prediction. So what's going to happen next? And there's a lot of examples of AI prediction being used at the moment. You can predict, for example, customers who are going to churn. You can predict rent arrears, lots of different examples here. And typically the prediction, we use that clustering and big data approach to feed it into it. So once you've understood what is happening, then this last section is why is it happening? And this is what the human brain does really well, but AI actually does really badly. And everything I've described so far in those first two columns exists, and you can go out and you can build it and you can buy it. But when you try and put those all together, all these narrow capabilities, what you don't necessarily get, or you don't get at all actually, is understanding or cognition. The brain can do that. It can take one concept, apply some ideas and create new concepts. But with AI, because it's based on data, it can't come up with new concepts at all. And any person that says that AI has understanding or cognition is lying, because what they're actually saying is that it's a mixture of all these narrow capabilities that they put together to give the impression of cognition. So the why something's happening is really at the moment in the world of science fiction and laboratories, and there are some interesting things going on around transfer learning at the moment, which can maybe move us to this point. But right now, any AI application, and I think this is why it's good to split it into these different groups, is a combination of each of these different narrow capabilities. So, Ian, that's a very long answer to a question. I did warn you at the beginning that it was a big question, but hopefully that's helped.
No, I think as part of this explaining, you've achieved that really, really well, Andrew, and brought that sort of to life. I just wondered for organisations who are looking at AI, what can they expect from deploying that? And obviously, we're working within the social housing space. You've got to know a lot of leaders working in housing organisations. What are the areas that you think AI might be of benefit across their business?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few. So we talked about prediction, and there's things like predicting rent arrears. So those tenants that are likely to fall into rent arrears next month or the next 3 months, for example, which can be really useful because you can then take the appropriate action ahead of time. Obviously, you wouldn't be saying to them, you're going to go into rent arrears, we need to do something about it. You'd be much more subtle than that. But you can take preventative actions to actually help them so they don't go on that slippery slope that rent arrears can suddenly lead to. Other things we're looking at with some of my clients are predicting voids. So which properties or which tenants are likely to void, which can obviously save quite a bit of money. And then there's other aspects as well, for example, using the image recognition, so using satellite imagery to look at the types of roofs that properties have. And, obviously flat roofs are more difficult than slope roofs, and are identifying trees in gardens as well, which could be a risk. I think there's lots of examples within that. We're also looking at, with another client, looking at predicting call volumes into the contact center as well, and also extracting data out of emails coming into the contact center as well. So effectively the AI reads the emails, understands what the email's about, and then can forward that to the right person in the organization to deal with, or deal with it automatically, for example. So yeah, there's plenty of examples. I think, in terms of what people can expect out of AI, a lot of people fear it and they think that it's really complicated, and and it's hard. AI is complex, it's complicated mathematics at the end of the day. But excuse me, they shouldn't fear AI. It does some really it can bring some really big benefits to organizations. But as long as you start small, and AI gives you that ability to start small, you can build up that capability over time. So you can really, what I always say to clients is, start with an AI strategy. That tells you the art of the possible. Once you understand the art of the possible, then you can say, right, now we understand, here's the things we should be doing, all ranked in priority order. What's the first thing we should look at, and how do we actually start there? Let's do a proof of concept on rent arrears or void prediction or whatever it is. And you can do that relatively easily, and then understand how AI can bring value to the organization, how you get data out, which is usually a big challenge as well, and then go from there. So, the mantra is always think big, act small.
So if I'm an organization looking to sort of move into the world of AI and machine learning around that, Andrew, how would I go about it in terms of, making sure what is the information, the data, what's the best way of trying to ensure success at your first attempt at building some AI into the business?
Yeah, I'd say don't rush into it. So this idea of an AI strategy, I think, and this is the work I do. So, I would say this, wouldn't I? But it's about understanding that your ambitions with regard to AI, the amount of data that you have available that can help you, and really understanding the art of the possible. That also helps articulate the benefits to senior management as well. So the whole organization can see this, and you get that buy-in. And then once you've got that, as I say, start on a proof of value. Look at the data, and always the data is the biggest challenge with AI. There's an adage in terms of building AI models that 20% of the time is actually building the model, and 80% of the time is just wrangling all the data and getting the data in. And there's a lot of truth in that as well. So understanding your data, what you have, and being able to access that data, having people that understand data within the organization is sometimes a challenge as well. So finding those people, and getting them on board and getting access to the data and just seeing what's available, I think is really the first step you should be looking at.
That's brilliant, that, Andrew. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to explain artificial intelligence to us and our members today. And I look forward to more exciting times within the Intelligent Automation Network throughout the remainder of the year. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian.